what that means, don't you? It's time for another exciting episode of Taxi TV Live. Yeah, baby. Excellent connection. There we are. We are broadcasting. All things are good. I would like to welcome somebody who is a very close friend, a longtime friend, a client of Taxi's, music library owner, Mr. Bob Mair. I think Bob is one of those people that I've become extremely, like, we talk to each other at like 10 o'clock at night on a Sunday night. If we can't talk during the week because we're too busy. So that's when we talk. We talk about, our wives, our kids, our homes, life stuff, not just music stuff, but we do talk about music. So I have come to learn that Bob is one of the smartest people I know in the music library side of the industry. He is a fierce protector of musicians and copyright and things like that because he himself is a musician and a composer. So I've invited him today to the show because he gets frustrated. He calls me. We have a Sunday night discussion, and we go through this list of, like, I call them dopey things that musicians do that really hurt them. They're only hurting themselves by doing it. Bob calls them pain points because from the library owner's perspective, it's like, ugh, this makes working with this person harder. And if I have to go back, even though that person's equally as good as this other person, and they both do, let's say, reggaeton, I'm going to go to the person who causes less friction in my life to get the equally good reggaeton every time. So the goal of today's show is to let you guys know what these pain points are so that you can learn to not commit these mortal sins. And the next time Bob or any other person in a library or a music supervisor, anybody anywhere in the industry who's involved in the process of selecting and licensing music, will know that you're equally easy to work with as the most professional musicians out there. Is that a good summary, Bob?
That is a good summary, and it's part of all that and pain points themselves. That's part of the reason I'm in business, because I eliminate the pain points for the music supervisors. All those things that I'll talk with you about. Those supervisors never see that stuff.
Right. If you're doing your job well, which I know you do.
If I'm doing my job well. I mean, I can't, we've talked, well, we can go through the list, but my job is to navigate the artist, their music, the writers, the mixes, where the music might end up going, can it go there? And I also need to know, yes, is this person going to be easy to work with?
Yep. How's the audio out there, everybody? Are we fairly equal in our levels? I'm seeing Bob is a little hotter on the meter than I am, but on the output meter, it looks like we're both about the same. So can those of you in the chat room, audio good here? Thank you, Michael Bruce Miller. Good to know. All right, so let's start with your number one pain point. He was so kind that he went ahead and listed all these things for me to make my life easier for the show today. I know which one is the biggest pain in your tuchus. We'll get to that one later. Okay, so number one on the list is number one pain point: no agreements between co-writers prior to submission.
Correct. It slows the whole process down. And if you want to make things fly at any kind of a pace, if you do that legwork prior to submission, and I'm talking prior to submission to Taxi, there's 3 writers on this. Okay, let's come to an agreement. Is it all right if I head up the pitch and I pitch it to Taxi so that Taxi can pitch it off to other people? There's nothing worse than Taxi finds this great piece of music, sends it my way, and typically my briefs are pretty specific.
Yeah.
And they deliver 99 out of 100 times. It's like I'm blown many, many times. So
What do
when
you
I
mean
get
when you say they deliver? You mean Taxi delivers?
taxi, yeah,
Okay.
taxi, yeah. I mean, I've asked for some of the, as Tom would attest, I've asked for some pretty out there things,
Right.
and it's amazing when I get things back um, that are at the quality that they are. So when I get something back and it's great quality, and I get the contact person's name or email or whatever, and I shoot off, an email. Hey, Taxi forwarded this to me. Thought the thing was great. Would love to include it in the catalog. Here's kind of our business model. This is how we work. Give it a read. Let me know. Da da da. And they haven't discussed it with their co-writers.
Right.
And then one of the writers goes, well, I don't want to do that. And so they've all gone through the process of sending music to you. You're sending the music to the listeners. The listeners are listening and judging the music. Then it goes into this vat of music that's going to be coming, and only to not go anywhere because I can't move forward without everybody being on board.
Right.
And I won't move forward.
No, you can't, and you end up in a legal situation.
Well, that's the piece that we have to. Part of the thing we have to do is to make sure that there is no skeleton in the closet, meaning that a writer doesn't just sign an agreement and then after the fact we find out, oh, there were two other writers on this, and then we have to unwind it, right? We have to unregister it. It's a nightmare. It's horrible.
And if you've already pitched it and the supervisor plays it for their EP or their director and everybody loves it and wants it and they know what the cost is, all the stars have lined up, and then that one thing makes it fall out, that supervisor will be less prone to call you next time around because they will remember that thing. Even if you've got a long and great relationship, they'll be a little bit irked that you let that slide through, so you can't.
I can't. And
Right.
And that's part of the, I do have writers that will send emails. Why is it taking so long for, this all to happen, for my music to die? Because all of these pieces have to be gone through. I mean,
Yep.
it's not just, oh, I like this piece of music, signed, it's done. And, I would also say, you mentioned if some of these writers are sending not through me, but directly to music supervisors, I can tell you right now, if you get into a hot supervisor's hands and they find out after the fact that there's two other writers, bye-bye.
Yeah, we literally, as you and I are doing the show, we just got an email from, a top 10% music supervisor that has worked on really big projects that is interested in licensing something from a Taxi member, and she reached out to us. We didn't reach out to that supervisor. This one just came out of thin air. It happens every now and then, but now we're having to do the same work you do to make sure that there aren't any unattributed writers. There are work for hires if there's anybody performing on it that wasn't the original creator, blah, blah, all that due diligence stuff. Just because, we don't think that we're going to start getting 2 calls a month from this supervisor, but we don't want that supervisor being at a Guild of Music Supervisor dinner 6 months from now saying, yeah, I reached out to Taxi because I heard somebody online and thought they were affiliated, and Taxi totally botched it. No. Everybody has to do their due diligence to make sure that the supervisor doesn't get caught in an embarrassing situation.
Yeah, I've never asked you to do this, but if one great thing for music libraries or publishers is that for the submission, and I've been thinking about maybe putting this into my briefs with you guys. If you're going to submit the music, checkbox, I verify that I have told my co-writers that I am pitching this music and I am able to talk on behalf of everybody.
Right. Yeah, I
Something
mean,
along.
we have a problem with people not reading the briefs well. You would know if you were a screener here at Taxi. So for them to say, okay, it's got to be exclusive, it's got to be this, it's got to be that. You got to have,
Right.
consensus with all your co-writers on it. They're not going to pay attention to it, sadly, just because so many people are stuck in this mindset of if they love the piece of music, they'll just use it. And
Well,
that's
some will.
well,
Some will.
really,
And
I've not met that person.
I have some horror stories that you would blow your mind.
Wow.
Yeah, just
Save
I
that for
have.
one of our Sunday night chats.
Yeah, I'll give a short story.
Okay.
Major music library, big. A friend of mine submits music to them,
Okay.
and it's crickets. There's no response. There's no nothing. A year or two later, I'm contacted, and he goes, "Hey, this stuff's unencumbered. Da 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 da. Would you be interested in putting it in the catalog?" So I do, and sure enough, I'm getting placements. Yada yada yada. This and that and the other. I get a phone call from NBC. I think it was, "Hey, we just got a phone call from Library X saying track is theirs."
Oh
and
no.
and I'm like,
Oof.
well, no, this track is ours, and we have the contract and the paperwork and the whole shebang, and we could back it all up. What happened was, and this wasn't the first, and it certainly wasn't the last time this major library did this. They took the music and ingested it into their system as though they controlled it.
With no
Not only
signed paperwork with the artist?
no signed paperwork.
Holy crap.
No signed paperwork, and the artist didn't know it. And not only that, but they started retitling that music. If a production, oh well, what if we give you half the publishing for this little production over here? We'll just give it this other name. And as we started going down the rabbit hole, Michael, it was so deep, and that writer could have probably sued for millions. The problem is they had, because it was a big library, they had big attorneys.
Yeah.
And those big attorneys just dragged it out. And so my poor friend, who's a great writer and a dear friend, he couldn't afford to keep paying his attorney.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking, what, back then, like 50 grand just to settle a copyright infringement. And so you multiply that 50 grand times however many times this was, with how many pieces of music, would have been a lot of money.
Wow. Glenn Ruger, I'm on a computer, not a phone. Check your sample rate. I'm looking at all the specs reading out right now, broadcasting, and everything is fine on my end. I'm not getting any glitches. I'm at 4,125 kbs, CPUs, fine. It's all good on this end. Anyway, that doesn't, sometimes there's an issue with the system that's broadcasting this. Anyway, let's continue on.
Sure.
Okay, number 2, pain point for music library executives is multiple email accounts. Let's talk about that. Oh, Bob, also, can you tilt your screen down a little bit, because you've got like 30% of your screen empty up there. There you go. Perfect. So multiple email accounts. Why should people have one email account that serves as the email account for all music?
Because my experience is that people don't check all of their accounts. And so case in point where I'll get a piece of music from Taxi, and Taxi goes, "This is the contact, this is the piece of music, here's the person's email address." And so I email the address and crickets, and
I'm only laughing because Bob and I have this conversation easily a half a dozen times a year.
it's very sad. And I sit and I go, God, I mean, at least you guys got paid for the person to send the music.
Right.
But I'm sitting here listening to music. I'm not getting paid, and it's like, oh yeah, I love this. This would be great. I know right where to put it, and I can't get a hold of these people.
You called
So
me on one like a month or two ago, and it was a young lady had a piece of music that you absolutely loved, and she totally ghosted you. And I
yeah,
finally got her either in an email or on the phone. I can't remember now. And she was nice, and she wasn't, somebody with a low IQ. But she was a regular, normal, smart person. But she
right,
said, "Oh, I don't think I got that email." And I said, "Really? It would have come from this email address." She goes, "Oh, yeah, I saw that, but I was afraid to open it." So you want to be in the music business. You're getting an email from somebody whose company you could easily search on Google and see that they are really in the music business and a quite successful company, and you're afraid to open it. That's like getting a telegram from the PGA Tour asking you to join the tour, and you go, I don't want to open the telegram because I don't know what the PGA. I don't get it. I don't get it.
right.
So
Well, and in my subject lines, it's always the name of my company, followed by taxi, followed by the name of the brief, even the taxi brief number, so
wow,
that it's all trackable. But it happens, and yeah, I mean, I think I put you in touch on one of them, but I'm reaching out to Tom too often
yeah,
with this situation, and he's been great. He'll reach out, and but the thing, or they have spam filters that are way too cranked up, and so
just
if
check your spam
I don't
folder.
know them, well, exactly. Exactly. And all these things, I mean, these are pain points for all of us, but the reason I'm having this conversation isn't to bitch. It's really to kind of go, look, if you guys want to do business, you got to do business,
Yeah,
and that's why I would highly recommend you have a dedicated business account for just sync licensing or however you want to do it, so that the email that taxi sends me is the email that you're going to be checking, and know that maybe taxi is the only person that gets those email addresses. I don't know.
yeah, we don't know either. People, it's like any other service. People sign up online, and they should go check there because even we try to reach out to our members and don't hear from them. So yeah, maybe they created a separate Gmail account just for music stuff on the day they joined Taxi, and then they forgot. Don't know. So number 3 is a pain point that it was mentioned here, but let's get deeper into it. Ghosting the publisher. And I know that sometimes you'll email people and you'll leave a phone message for them and you don't hear back. I don't understand why anybody would do that, but how often does that happen?
Well, I don't have phone numbers, so I don't call people. It is email.
Oh,
So
okay.
it once I send an email, it is off into the void. Now I'm not sending attachments anymore. Well, actually, that isn't so. I'm going to be eliminating attachments going forward because I don't know if that's part of the reason that it's hitting people's junk or whatever. It's all going to be in the cloud going forward. In fact, all my contracts are going to be in the cloud going forward. Everything.
Yeah.
But it's really about you guys being able to connect with publishers you want to connect with. And most of the taxi people know this, but the reason I like to do this with you, Michael, is because there's a bunch of people that don't,
Yeah.
and it's important. I mean, if you're going to sign up for taxi, you're going to play this game and try and get your music out there. I mean, you got to put your big boy pants on, and be professional.
Yeah.
And I have zero problem with a writer calling me back. Not calling me, but sending me an email going, thank you so much for being interested in my piece of music. I don't want to do business with your company because of X, Y, or Z, whatever it is. That at least I could go, oh, okay. next, I can move on.
Right.
But when I'm ghosted, it's a little like, why do you spend the money to send the stuff to taxi if you're not going to be responding?
Yeah, like that young lady you called me about, Anyway, number 4 pain point for music library executives: people not knowing the difference between an artist name and the writer's names. For example, Lennon and McCartney versus the Beatles. Can you elaborate and tell us why that's problematic and how it rears its ugly head?
Well, it's problematic because that's another piece that hasn't generally always been worked out. Some writers have their team, and their team has either a band name or a moniker or some entity that they call themselves. And so that's fine as long as I get the writers' names and what that entity is. As you know, Michael, I mean, most of my business is not, how do I say this? It needs to be credited in a way that, when I get a film placement, if there's no artist name, I can't go, oh, well, the artist was, and then 3 writers' names or 4 writers' names. I mean, they're the writers, they're not the artist, So it's, and I've had people just send me things, and I'll go, well, who's the artist? Are you guys a band? What is the breakdown? What is the agreement between you people? And I get, confused responses, and they don't know what to say. So, if you're a production team, come up with a production team name, get a single email address, and you're going to be streamlining the process so much.
Yeah. All this stuff makes perfect sense. And unfortunately, we're at the intersection of inexperienced, unprofessional, and I mean unprofessional in that what defines professional is getting paid to do something. I don't mean unprofessional like they're acting in an untoward way, although some may. But we're bringing inexperienced people into a real business environment where the other people who are successful have figured out that business environment. So for you as an executive from a music library, you could just continue to work with the experienced people who make your life easy and frictionless, rather than choosing to work with people that are a pain in the butt. And that's or make it difficult. I shouldn't add a negative connotation.
Well, it is true. And it's gotten to the point now where, we're very blessed that we've been in business for as long as we have, that we've got the contacts that we have. And and Stephanie is always at it, like, why are you spending all that extra time, trying to handhold these writers? And, there's 1,000 people sending you music every day. And I'm like, because I'm a writer and I know what it feels like to be on that side, so I take the time to try and talk them through. But boy, I mean, it can be, and sometimes I go, God, is it a language barrier? But then I get these writers that are from, Eastern Europe that read through my documents and to a T get back to me with everything I ask for. So it's not that, it's just a matter of being willing to sit down, read the directions, just like anything else. And if you're going to engage in this business, there is a plethora of information that is available for free
right here.
So, I would take it, which is why one of the reasons I do Taxi TV. It's one of the reasons I've done so many rallies. It's, I'm trying to pass forward a vat of knowledge. And as we said earlier, with Stephanie, the vat of knowledge has gotten even bigger because the game keeps changing. I mean, it's not CDs anymore. It's not vinyl anymore. It's, there's a lot of pieces moving and AI's happening, and you got to stay on top of the business.
Yes, you do. Let's move on to number 5, which is a really important one: not reading the taxi listing or brief. An example you gave was vintage versus vintage sounding, exclusive versus non-exclusive, no AI allowed, which is pretty much industry wide. Certainly today, it may change at some point. Um, anyway, okay, tell us about, give us some examples. Tell us why it's so important that they do read the brief.
Well, because what it does is it eliminates wasted time. And in this business, it's a fast moving business. That's the last thing that we need, is to be slowed down along the way. So if you Taxi sends out a brief and it's like, it needs to be vintage 1970s songs, and whatever, and then I get this music and I respond to a writer, and they go, oh, I because I can pretty much tell. I mean, I've only been around for centuries. So I listen and I go, shit, man, that sounds like it was recorded this year, not in the 70s. I mean, the fidelity's too good, and I'm hearing synths that weren't even invented in the 70s. So I'll reach out to the writer and give them the benefit of the doubt, and I'll say, hey, I just want to verify that the Taxi listing was for vintage 1970s songs. Was this that? And the response will be something to the effect of, oh, I thought it was just vintage sounding. So now you've wasted my time, you've wasted your time, you've wasted Taxi's time. It's just keeping the wheels moving, and the same thing happens with exclusive versus non-exclusive. If you don't read the Taxi brief, you don't know what you're submitting to. You don't know what you're engaging in. You don't know what it means. And
People don't read the briefs. They really don't. I mean, any screener at Taxi would tell you the number one reason by far for the screener not being able to forward the music is not that the music wasn't good or even great. It's just not even close to what was asked for. Or if it says you need a country song with a male vocal, and they submit stuff with three females that sound like the Lennon sisters, it's like clearly not a male vocal.
Right. Yeah, and this is just, it's another thing that just wastes time, unfortunately. And it's depressing for me, to be honest with you, just that and the music could be great.
Yeah.
And that makes it even worse, because now I've got this writer that didn't read the brief, and then I have to unwind that whole thing or verify. I've had to do that with Chinese language vocals, or I forget what else I've gotten from you guys, French maybe, I can't remember. And I'm listening to the vocals and I'm going, I don't know, there's something with this. And I'll reach out to the person, and sure enough, they're AI vocals. They had somebody sing into whatever software they had, and sure enough, it's in Korean or Chinese or whatever it was. And then I have to go, well, AI is not copyrightable in the US at the moment. And I have gotten responses, well, we're in the UK and that law isn't applicable. So that's the other piece that we as publishers have to pay attention to. When I sign a piece of music, where I'm getting this music is going around the world. So I can't have it be, ooh, that's a cool pixelation. Wow. That's really cool.
Yeah. I have no idea. Yeah, and it's funny. All my numbers are good right now on the screen. That's a weird really one. Anyway,
but, so you have to be able to know laws of other countries. You have to know, because things like public domain here in the U.S. aren't the same laws as the public domain in Europe, and so there's a lot of moving pieces. I don't want to scare people away from business. It's really just as simple as, have your ducks in a row. If you're going to be submitting music to Taxi, just have your ducks in a row. Have your writers on board, and they know that you're pitching it, and they know, and they know it's going to an exclusive or a non-exclusive catalog, and they go, yeah, that's okay. and you have your single email address so that when somebody goes responds to a taxi brief, it's not going to the junk.
Yeah.
That's a good place to start.
It all seems to make so much sense when you say it. People are probably shaking their collective heads out there in TV land going, yeah, but if they saw what goes on the receiving end, they would be in shock. And then these people, who don't get anywhere because they're making all these mistakes and maybe their music is really good, then they go online. I see them on I forget the name of the site where people, basically review music libraries, and they complain about the library. And I sit there shaking my head going, I know that library. They're very buttoned up. They're good people. They get tons of work for the people in their catalog. My guess is the mistakes are being made on the writer's end, but they're not going to say, I screwed up in public. They're going to go, yeah, I signed with that library. I've had 3 pieces of music in their catalog for 5 years and haven't made a penny. There are just so many ways that can go wrong. Like when people complain about taxi. I was a member for a year, didn't get a thing. Turns out they made 2 submissions, and they were both not good choices. Gee, why did you not get anything? Because you didn't walk up to the plate and swing the bat. Let's go on to number 6, which is not reading the literature and instructions that you send out to people once you have gone through the process of running a listing with Taxi, getting a playlist from Taxi, hearing something you like, and then reaching out. What is it that you send them, and what do they get wrong?
Well, what we are now sending is extremely detailed, because I'm just tired of finding the skeletons in the closet after the fact. And I have music supervisors that the briefs I get are like, basically, I'll know if you didn't read it. I'll know if I'm looking for A, B, C. I don't want, I don't want profanity. And here's the words for the show that they're deeming profanity, because different shows have a different version of what that is.
Okay.
And so, and I know, because these supervisors that I'm talking about, they're no bullshit. They're the real deal, and you don't want to piss those people off. You want to give them what they're looking for.
Yeah.
So I've taken that approach now, and it's a very lengthy bunch of paperwork I send. It'll be a basic boilerplate of our agreement, what that means, what we need from the writer to submit the music, how we like it submitted. We tend to like AIFs. We need to know who the writers are. We need to know everybody involved, and it's let's put it this way. It's much more involved than a taxi brief. Multiply a taxi brief times 10, and you're getting close to what we're looking for. And it's because we need to know, do you have a PRO? Well, I can't tell you how many people submit music and they don't have a PRO.
They don't even know what a PRO probably is.
That has happened. And I've had people adopted and they don't know what their real name is or what their, everything under the sun.
Wow.
You can't
That's
imagine.
a first. I've never heard that one.
Yeah, well, it's it's interesting. But so I can tell if somebody hasn't read the brief, and they'll kick back some information, and it'll be all of a sudden there'll be some writers showing up on the paperwork. I'll be, oh, so have you told these other people that you're engaging with Black Toast Music, or sorry, wasn't supposed to say anything, with the company, and they'll go, oh, sorry, I didn't talk to those people. Let me get back to you. And it's like,
do you think that's because of just duh, or is it because they're trying to hide the I had
No, it's
somebody got
not.
a
It's not.
placement in a major motion picture on something that I had a production agreement with them. This is going back literally like 40 some years, and the production agreement said if there was a film and TV placement that I would get X%. From the deal because I put up the studio time, my expertise, blah blah blah. Anyway, they got a place in like, I don't know, Freaky Friday, one of those very popular movies of that ilk, and didn't tell me. And I happened to be watching the movie with my kids years ago and saw the song in there, and then the credits rolled. I wasn't anywhere in there and never saw a penny. But what are you going to do? Are you going to sue them for $5,000? No.
No, no. You send a nice email and you go, "Hey, remember our understanding that this was going to happen?" But that's where verbal agreements are not necessarily binding anymore.
Right.
So I highly recommend people just take that extra step. Just take and people become not friends anymore. Stuff happens. Someone gets angry at somebody and then they're not writing together anymore. And then one of the two writers wants to submit the song to my company. And then the other writer goes, "No, I don't want you, and you know what I'm saying? It's
Yeah.
like, or they do submit it and then they've got to eat their craw and go crawling back to their co-writer that they're in an argument with. "Hey, I submitted this. They want to sign it. Can we please do this?" And it's a nightmare.
I remember we had one years ago here at Taxi where a husband and wife were a writing team. And one of them was disloyal, unfaithful to the other. And they were
Mm-hmm.
going through a very acrimonious divorce. And the membership, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, was in the wife's name. And she just wouldn't cooperate on anything with her co writer, soon to be ex husband. And it became a problem. She
There's another thing on a similar kind of note that I should probably mention, which has happened to me now quite a few times. I'll get a piece of music from Taxi. Piece of music's great. I'll reach out. This usually happens on vintage material. I'll reach out to the contact person and I'll go, "Oh, okay, so, I send the paperwork, need to know the writers, da, da, da." And one or two of the people are dead.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're representing a piece of music and two of the writers, co-writers, band members are dead. So I turn to the contact and I go, "Well, do you have paperwork that allows you to do deals on behalf of the families, the estates of these people that are deceased?" "Oh, I didn't know I needed to do that. They're dead." It's
Yeah.
like, so I have to unwind that too.
We have a mutual friend whose name I won't mention that is the founder and CEO of what is probably by far the most prolific catalog of vintage music dating all the way back to like even the 30s, I believe.
I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah, and they're great. They are really nice
They are.
people. They're exceptionally buttoned up. And he's another person in your category of like, we could have an hour-long phone call on Sunday night at 10 o'clock just as friends. And he's told me some stories, not complaining stories, but yeah, much of what he deals with is dated far enough back that there are a lot of dead people. And the hoops that they jump through to get this stuff to be clear enough that they can feel good about it.
Right.
Quite amazing.
I've talked with him about it because that is forensic. Now you're doing forensic because and Stephanie is she's insane with this stuff. She goes down the rabbit hole to see when it was recorded, where it was recorded, who was the label at the time, was it a private label, an indie label, what happens if the label owns the master and that label from the 40s is defunct now.
Happens
right?
all the time, yeah.
Happens all the time. So the label's defunct. So then you go, well, where's the paperwork for the person that, it doesn't just revert back to the writers. There's paperwork that trails all of it, and you got to dig in. And I've turned to him and I said, man, you're a machine to go after that. I do it not near to his level.
Yeah, he does. If you took the whole rest of the industry and the quantity of vintage music that they've had to go down those rabbit holes for, that wouldn't even come close to equaling what he's done in 25 years. I mean, that guy, he should write a book. When he decides to sell his company and retire, he should write a book to teach everybody else how to do it right, because they've got it down to a science, and I give him a lot of credit for that. Let's talk about something that can be a bit of a sticky wicket, as they say. People not understanding what an exclusive agreement is or what in perpetuity is, and then somehow becoming surprised when they find years later they come back to you and go, oh, I didn't realize we were signing it to you exclusively in perpetuity. Where is perpetuity? No, it's not a small town in Iowa. It means forever. Explain, first of all, what exclusive is for those who may be new to the game, what perpetuity is, and why both those things from the library perspective are a good thing, and ultimately, in some ways, if not several, good for the writers.
Well, once again, we're kind of circling back to, keep it simple, stupid. It's make sure you have agreements with your co-writers, have your names in order, have a single email address that is a contact situation. And again, read the taxi brief. Don't just browse it. Read the blacklist music, the paperwork to a T. And it's nothing worse than, and I'll get to your other question, there's nothing worse than, somebody signing an agreement only to go 5 years later, oh, I didn't realize that. It's like, yeah. Well, it's like, well, did you buy the house? Did you buy the car? Did you sign the agreement? Are you making your payments on your automobile? It's like, an agreement's an agreement, and we're not pulling the wool over anybody's eyes. Our agreements are as explained to a T as anything. That being said, and I always encourage people to have attorneys read whatever they're signing. I mean, it's unfortunate that one has to do that, and you don't have to, but you better be educated. And there's nothing worse than, it's like a taxi brief that doesn't get read. Oh, I didn't realize you meant vintage. I thought you meant vintage sounding. It's like, no, it says very plainly, because I read your briefs. I get copied on them. I know exactly what they're saying. Yeah. And your verbiage is very clear, certainly for my briefs.
It is for everybody, but thank you for the compliment.
Yes. So when I read that, I go, okay, so if I get stuck with something somebody didn't read, it's the same thing with my agreements. If you don't read, you're going to get burned in some fashion. You're going to find yourself making a mistake that was unnecessary. And I'm not out here to rape and pillage writers or musicians. I'm here to just do business, and our agreement's pretty straightforward. And our agreement is, to answer your question, it is exclusive in perpetuity. And that was a decision that wasn't made in the very beginning with my catalog. That was something that, due to more pain points that we don't need to get into, it became very clear to me that if it's not exclusive, what I was running into was writers just deciding to pitch on their own. And they would pitch to somebody I don't know, and which seems to be fine, except for, that person that they pitch to, then they go, well, who controls the copyright? Who controls the song? Is it you, or is it this company that you've got an agreement with? And, then they go, well, it was the company we got the agreement with. And then they get confused. Why didn't the company that they had the agreement with, why didn't that company pitch the piece of music. And I've also had instances where co-writers would take a piece of music and retitle and pitch it, and I find out. I mean, the first 10 years of my catalog, I was either a co-writer or a writer on every freaking song in my catalog. So it wasn't until after about 10 years I went, I can't write fast enough to maintain the business. So what I was seeing is also this trend where you got supervisors 5 years after getting a submission, remembering, oh, I love that piece of music from that company, and I want to use it in this show that's didn't exist 5 years ago, right? So I, or my company, got the music to these people. There's a placement that's going to happen because of our efforts, and it was a decision where it's like, if I do an exclusive catalog, the beauty for me and for my clients, there won't be any question mark who controls the music, ever. And if you come back to me in 20 years, it'll be, yeah, we still control that copyright. And I've been doing this for 35 plus years now. So, those people are still around. A lot of those supervisors are definitely still around, and they'll reach back out to me. And so that's the exclusive piece. The perpetuity piece is a similar situation. It's just to be doing reversion clauses after reversion clauses after reversion clauses, and then having to resend out to the, God, especially if you're doing non-scripted and you're sending out gobs of music, and you have to go back to that company that has God knows how many edit bays with how many editors working on reality TV shows, and you have to go, oh, this song I don't control anymore. And then they all have to go back to their hard drives or wherever the hell they store the stuff.
Yeah.
And remove
they
it.
don't. And they don't. Nobody's got, nobody in the industry has the time or the will to do that work for somebody else.
That I should be doing.
Yeah, I get emails from a well-known music library, one that we don't do business with, but it's a big, super well-known brand name library. I would say at least once a quarter, maybe even once a month, where it says, hey, everybody, just want to let you know that our deals are up with these 15 people. Do they honestly think that somebody in an edit bay is going to go back to their lists and their bins and go, okay, searching for this one and delete, can't use that anymore, and searching for that one and delete anymore? And they may have sent that email to 200 people. I would venture to say not one person out of 200 is going to do that. So then there's the problem of that stuff getting used after the deal is up. If they're smart when they do a deal that's not in perpetuity, maybe there's some sort of sunset thing in there that says, if it happens to somebody we supplied the music to for a period of 5 years after we supplied, that we split 50-50, whatever that deal is. But it's convoluted. Frankly, I would be embarrassed as a music library to have to send out an email every month telling my client base around the world, please delete these things from your bins. It's just,
yeah, it's asking them to do work.
Yeah.
And it's kind of okay for me. I'm trying to minimize the amount of work that I'm having to do on my end with all of the going down the rabbit holes, finding out who the co-writers are, finding out all this pain point stuff. But I'm me. I run the company, so I'll take it on. But I am not going to reach out to anybody that I've spent 30 some odd years building a relationship with and ask them to do work for me.
Right.
Yeah, I don't control this anymore, so eliminate, these 100 songs, and you're right, they have to go track them down, and maybe they will, maybe they won't, maybe they don't even remember. And how many people take hard drives from old jobs they've had And that hard drive has a bunch of music that they got 5 years ago. Then they're on this other show, and they may or may not have removed the, you know what I mean? It's just, I like to keep things simple, really straight ahead. You know, it makes business flow better. There's no question about who gets paid. There's no question about who controls something. You know, and let me define a little bit more. When I say we are an exclusive catalog, that doesn't mean that as a writer, you are now exclusively signed to my company.
Not as a writer, but that piece of music is.
That piece of music. It's a one-off, deal by deal by deal by deal. So you may be involved with 5, 10 publishers with different music, because we will not have a piece of music that is in anybody else's catalog. And there's another reason for that. Exclusivity. I mean, who doesn't want to, if you're an end user, go, well, I know if I go to Bob, it's, you know, I am not going to have any ghosts in the closet. You know, there's no skeletons in there. You know, the I's are dotted and T's are crossed, and the goodwill in the community, and you know, all that has value. And so that's the exclusive part. The perpetuity part, to define perpetuity, as you said, it means forever. So it's like getting married.
It's just like, well, but in a marriage, you can exercise the reversion clause. It's just going to cost you. I should have said that to, well, my first wife divorced me because she may have been interested elsewhere. But let's just say that, yeah, if somebody walks in the kitchen and goes, I've decided to exercise my reversion clause. We've been married for 5 years. I'm out. That wouldn't go over so well.
Right. Well, you know, and you and I've had conversations where I've, for all intents and purposes, fired writers. So
yeah.
You're I'm done with you, you know. And it's been some writers that you and I know that are phenomenal.
Yeah.
Super talented. But when it gets to the point where it's just a pain. It's just a freaking pain for whatever reason, you know. Writer every week sending an email. Hey, did you get any placements this week? Hey, did you? You know, it's like, dude, if I were to answer every writer that wants to know, you know, did I get a placement? Believe me, if you get a placement, you're going to hear about it as fast as I do.
Yeah.
So that's just how we operate. People don't know that, and it would be a very interesting reality show to be the life of a music publisher, because all these people will get to see the day-to-day, the email responses we have to give to music supervisors, the going down the rabbit hole, find, oh, there's actually 2 other writers on this. Damn, we chase that down. Oh, they copywrote this under a slightly different title. It's the same piece of music. You know, I think I also, on that list is abbreviations, where it will be somewhat, the title will be abbreviated or altered just enough. You know, like I love you, they send it and it's love you. And I'm like, well, we'd love to sign love you. And then, you know, come to find out it was released, you know, in the 50s, and it was called I Love You, and that's the way it was copywritten back in the 50s. And it's just, all I'm trying to say is simplify. Keep it simple. Know where the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. It's as important as the music.
Thank you for saying that, because it's the music business, and people think we just come up with that phrase arbitrarily. But no, you know what? I understand, and I forgive musicians, even though they can frustrate the hell out of me. But I forgive them because we've spent the last 4 or 5 decades in the mindset of the record industry. Write 3 hits, have a great stage performance, and you might be able to get an A&R person interested enough to fly out, see your show, then bring their boss, and then get a record deal with the company. But the
Right.
business aspects of it never come into play. Even as pro songwriters working with Warner Chappell, Sony ATV, the regular cast of characters on the pro writer side of the music of the record industry, they take care of the business stuff. But literally starting in 1994 with a phone call I got from a woman named Susan, who was the first music library. I used music libraries when I was an audio post engineer, so I knew what they were, but I never supplied music to any of them. And this lady called me up. She sounded like Joey's agent on Friends, Estelle. Hey, sweetheart, it's Susan. Can you find me some horrific music? You could hear the ash falling off her cigarette, while she was talking to you. It was hanging out of her mouth. It had too much lipstick on it. I just had this vision of her. Turned out she was a great lady, and we became great friends. But that was the first time that I'm aware of where somebody from the professional side of the industry came looking for music creators on the independent, unprofessional side of the industry, where there wasn't like you may have had friends that you played with or did sessions with or co-wrote with that you would add to your catalog. But this was the first time somebody ever reached out and went, all right, I'm opening up my door to submissions as long as they're curated through this company, Taxi. And so that was how many, 30 years ago, 31 years ago. Well, here we are 3 decades later, and people still don't understand the very basic difference between the record industry and now. The same people want to be in the sync industry, but it does require them to have business knowledge about what the norms are and the practices are, because there is nobody between them and you or that lady Susan that just takes care of stuff for them. And frankly, a lot of people still say, why does a library get half? Well, I hope people are learning today about what you guys go through to earn that half. It's not like you sit there and go, aha, I sucked another musician in. Another dumb musician didn't know any better than to sign this contract. I'm taking advantage of it. I've never seen one bit of evidence by one library owner that I've personally known in 33 years of doing this, who was in it to take advantage of anybody. It's just not the nature of people that end up maybe in the record industry, yes, but not in the simple little sync industry. All right, let's move on to number 9, which is writers. I love this one. After years of being signed to your catalog and pushing their music, getting their music placed, promoting the artist and their music on Spotify, social media, all of a sudden they want to change their artist name, potentially undoing years of artist goodwill, and I would add branding to that, that's been built up by you in this music supervisor community. And there is a real benefit to that if music supervisors see the name of an artist often enough, and then you suggest that artist on a playlist, there is that little thing that goes off in their brain whether they realize, oh yeah, I've heard it. Oh, they must be good because they get a lot of work. So what would you say to people that decide, well, I don't want to be the push-up daisies anymore. I want to be the red roses.
Right. Well, I try as best I can to talk them out of it, because I'm aware that they're shooting themselves in the foot. Mm-hmm. If you want to change your moniker, that's fine. If it's just a completely different sound, a completely different thing. But to do it because all of a sudden you just arbitrarily go, I don't like this name anymore. Now I want this. You're really shooting yourself in the foot. I mean, one of the people that I'm thinking of with this, and it's so funny. The person, got all up in it, got an attorney involved. It was really ridiculous. And I'm like, well, the paperwork that we have says that, this is the writer's name and this is the writer's artist, PKA, professionally known as. And that's on my agreement. So I don't know what to say, but you can't undo that, And the attorney apparently didn't realize. Oh, now that I look at the agreement, I see that da 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 da. So I mean, I knew that we were not in the wrong, but what really put the nail in the coffin for me was when I uh, did some business with a major advertising agency, and they were going through and they went, "Oh, you also represent," and they mentioned the person's artist name that I was representing, not the artist name that they were trying to go to. So now you've got this major ad agency that knows this person as, would you say, the dandelions or whatever?
Yeah, pushing
And
up daisies.
pushing up daisies. It's like they would have never known it was the same because they remembered the name. And so I'm like, just figure it out. Take a second. Know who you are. Know what your name is. Know what your address is. Well, that's another one. That's another pain point. Gotta bring this one up.
Okay.
If you move and you've done publishing deals, let those publishers know. There's because we can't pay you if we don't have an address.
Really, it's not. I mean, do you actually mail checks, or do you do direct
Well, we used
deposit?
to. We
Yeah,
used to. Now we're all on ACH, but we still have to have the information.
right.
And if your information changes is in any fashion, if you get married, all of a sudden your name changes. It's like we need to know this stuff.
Wow.
Let us know. Shoot an email. I've moved. Da da da. Besides that, I mean, well, yeah, we don't send contracts anymore either. Thank God we're not snail mail much anymore. I was just going through my closet. I found a stack of blank CDs. I'm like, oh my God, those were the days. Oh, geez. You have to burn CDs to send out to supervisors. That was just,
We had
that was,
such a problem with taxi members not being able to get clear shell cheap cassettes and blank CDs that somewhere around 1994 and 95, my then business partner and I bought a container of blank CDs, one of those big containers that you see on the back of a flatbed truck. We
right.
bought that and started a business called like Midnight Tape and Audio or something like that. And we had one of my oldest friends was the head of quality control at Capitol Records, so I had him test all the CDs because that's what he did for a living. And we found these CDs that cost about 10 cents a piece, and we were selling them for like 30 cents a piece or something ridiculously cheap, and they were really good. And then CDs went out of fashion, and I would say that we probably had to recycle 20,000 CDs, like enough to fill half a garage.
Yeah, well, and this is what I was just going through. I'm like, you know what? I've finally gotten to the place where I could actually have enough space that I can go in and start cleaning some of this stuff out because, with technology, everything is gone in 2 years. So I can't tell you how many hard drives were in this closet.
Oh yeah.
You don't ship hard drives anymore. CDs, you don't burn CDs anymore. I mean, my daughter used to sit on my floor and help me stuff the jewel cases
Uh-huh.
with yeah, I mean, it was crazy times. But the point being is that you should let your publisher or whoever you're doing business with, let them know. I've moved. I have a new bank account. I'm no longer in the United States. I live in Spain. Any number of things. Inform them.
I understand people can make mistakes, things can slip your mind, but there's sometimes when you, myself, other friends of ours in the industry, you hear about stuff and you go, okay, that wasn't just a simple little stupid mistake that any of us could have made. That was just pure laziness. And that's where you draw the line. A mistake can be forgiven. Laziness, it's like, no, I'm not doing your work for you. You want to become a professional, act like one. It's that simple. Number 10, you alluded to this before, but let's knock it off anyway. Sending abbreviated file names on submitted files. It's impossible to discuss a track that you don't know the name of. It's also impossible to create a valid agreement. Let's go a little further than your explanation before. We see stuff where people say, like new song mix 1 Saturday night version 2.0. And that's the song title. And that goes in their metadata. And that's what shows up in their taxi submission. I see them because when we do compilation CDs here, we send out those quarterly comps that all of our clients get, and the stuff makes it through the system. We stop it before it goes out the door. But I'm amazed. You would think that people would... I've done, 2 or 3 episodes on Taxi TV about how much titling matters. And yet people use these abbreviated titles. I understand it for you titling the file to sit on your desktop. So tomorrow morning when you wake up, you remember what that file is. That I get. But that shouldn't go to anybody but you. So tell me how that wreaks havoc with your process.
Well, like I say, if I'm not going to sign something with that as a title, largely because I agree with you. And I learned this probably the first year in business when I was a writer and building my own catalog. And I realized titles, as you said, they when you're looking down a list of songs, as a possibility, and a title jumps out at you, well, now you might listen. So it's sort of like first impressions. It's like, hey, I want you to meet my new girlfriend, X K55,000.
Well, if AI gets any better any faster, that will be your new girlfriend, Bob.
It could very well be. But you know what I mean? It's like, well, hi, K5500. Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
It's I wrote a song called Blank, okay, way back. Probably the second song that got placed in my catalog.
Wow.
And the supervisor saw the title, had the perfect scene, and boom, it was in within 2 weeks. And I realized from that point, I was like, titles really matter, even if it's just instrumental music.
Yeah.
If you call it something boring or something trivial, then that's probably where it's going to live, if it lives. But if you come up to give it, you're in the business of being a creator. Create. Don't, as you say, don't get lazy.
It's a really good use of AI, by the way, is coming up with titles, which is a fair use of AI. That's not going to cause you any copyright problems or anything. But I did at least 8 hours of research on a weekend prepping for a Taxi TV I did about titling. And it's quite amazing how you can take a title that you have. I always use the same example for like a surf rock thing. And you call it Stephanie's song because that's your girlfriend at the time. And she inspired that by wearing her cute little polka dot bikini on the beach with her surfboard. And so now it's Stephanie's song. That doesn't tell you as a potential signer of that song into your catalog. It doesn't tell a music supervisor. It doesn't tell an editor what the song's about. Whereas if the song is called, Surf's Up, or Splish Splash or something, you get an idea. It's a beachy, surfy song, and you might listen to it. So if you take that information and put it into ChatGPT or Grok or whatever and just say, give me 20 alternate titles that would give somebody the impression that the genre and style of the song is related to surfing and surf rock, about 60 or 70% of the suggestions that come back are good, but then you should take those suggestions and refine them a little bit, not just for the sake of doing that, but they're pretty darn good. Make them great, but that's a good way to learn how to target your titles to telegraph what the music is all about, especially for instrumental.
Well, I was just going to say, and that's instrumental is where typically this goes on.
Yep.
And tension cue 1, tension cue, whatever,
Right.
and it's like, well, that gives me nothing. If you call it big bombastic boom, you're going to get a better idea of what you're about to hear. Or fast, aggressive riser. At least you're going to know, oh, it's going to be a riser and it's going to be fast and aggressive, or at least that's what the title is.
And you know what? That's not the prettiest title or the most. Nobody's going to give you points for being creative, but they will all appreciate the fact that they know what it is. Yeah, some of that stuff that I came up with in the research for that Taxi TV, the titles that I saw were like, they weren't mundane, but they were like Big Thrill Riser. So you know that there's a riser in there, and you get some, whatever. You're not trying to win an Oscar or a Grammy or an Emmy for your title. You're trying, like you said, it's like, if as a man who is single and out, not looking for a girlfriend, but you're attracted to certain types of people, maybe certain physical attributes. Put those things in there because they are flags that signal to the person who's shopping, quote unquote, this may be what you're interested in.
Yeah.
Anyway, people miss
and
opportunities.
It also it translates into on song levels. It translates into major hits. Like Fame or trying to off the top of my head, I'm not thinking of a bunch of them, but the title tells you what you're going to be hearing, or it's going to give you an idea what it's going to be about.
I want to talk about one that is not on this list. It's not a pain point, but you're the perfect person to ask. And you brought something up when we were chatting before we went on air, that a particular show that you had done business with for many, many years, the show is being shut down. So you lose an outlet for your catalog in that process. And you know that I'm always telling people, don't sign everything you've got with the first company that wraps their arms around you and says, we love you, you're great. Because as you so incredibly demonstrated to me about 7 or 8 years ago, you called me and asked me for the phone number or email address of a mutual friend of ours who's another library executive. And I said, why? What's up? Are you selling your catalog to him or something? And you said, no, I heard something today that was really, really good, but it's just not right for my clients. And I think it is right for his clients. And I thought that was so menschy of you for the writer's sake to hand it off and for the library's sake. Both of them would come up a winner, and you were taking the time to do that. So the root of that is that some people will throw everything they've got, every style, genre, instrumental or vocal songs, with the first library because, finally somebody gets me. They're showing me some love. I feel so appreciated. I've been waiting for this my whole life, and I certainly understand that emotion, that feeling. But what they don't get is that they're putting music in that catalog that probably shouldn't live there because that company doesn't have the right kind of clients. Could be a company that rarely ever does unscripted. So they don't really need a lot of instrumental music. But I was reminded of this recently. One of our members wrote in for the taxi success story thing in our newsletter and said, yeah, this company reached back out to me and they said, what else you got? And I signed 62, everything in my catalog, 62 pieces of music with this company. And the first thought, I kept my mouth shut, I probably shouldn't have, but first thought I had was, oh man, that was such a bad mood. I can't imagine that all 62 of those are right for that company and their clients. So am I crazy in thinking that people should hedge their bets and spread them around and doing the research, and a library reaches out to you and then they said, what else you got? Find out what their shows are that they work with and the type of music they're most successful with before you commit other stuff?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's another thing that kind of gets under my skin a little bit. It's like, I'm not hiding anything. My clients are pretty visible on my website.
Yeah.
So, it's like take 2 seconds and do your research. I do this. This is the kind of agreements we do. You can find out who is exclusive in perpetuity, who is exclusive with reversions, who is a retitler. You can find all that information, for the most part, is out there on the web. And just take a second to do it. Have ChatGPT do it. Go, I'm looking for this kind of a deal. What are the music libraries that offer those kinds of deals? I mean, the information is out there. And to go back to your question about should you hedge your bet by signing music to a variety of music libraries, I've always been a fan of that. And I, in the beginning with you, a writer, Paul Otten, I remember saying this to him, Paul, I love your stuff. I'd sign everything. I said, but dude, I don't know everybody. It's like other people know other clients. It's just the nature of the business. Well, Paul was another one that, the supervisors got to know his name. And when they saw his name, they knew whatever it was, if I'm sending it, it had to pass my criteria. And that if I'm sending it and his name was on it, it's going to be good. Yep. So they listened to it and yada, yada, yada. Well, then it got to the point where Paul the market got pretty flooded. And, because the guy's prolific, writes a lot. So it can, on that level, maybe bite you a little bit. You know what I mean? It's
Great point.
Oversaturation. In instrumental music, it's not going to matter. In vocal music, I mean, I can't say anything bad about Paul. Paul is just fantastic, and he's so freaking prolific. It's just absolutely crazy. But and I've had people, actually. I had a supervisor use a piece of his music that was this is another one. He forgot that he had signed this piece of music to another publisher before he signed it to me, or after he signed it to me. I think it was after he signed it to me. Long story short, we tried to get it worked out, and we reached out to the music supervisor. It was after we signed it. He signed it to another company, and not to be evil or anything, he just whoops,
right, because he is buttoned up and professional.
He is. Well, I'll get through with this, but basically, I called the supervisor. I'm like, hey, this person I know very, very well, do a lot of business with. Well, I'm sorry, that's between you and this other publisher. I'm not getting in the middle of it. And I totally get it. And it got worked out. Everything was fine. And the other company, we showed them when the agreement was signed and they released the song. So everything was fine. But where I was going to go with that is, and I said this to Paul way, way back, I'm like, dude, if you're going to be writing and putting your music in a lot of different catalogs, you need to keep an Excel spreadsheet or some spreadsheet.
Yeah, use Composer Catalog, or there's several things out there. Oh, gosh, there was one we had at the Road Rally last year, and the name is I can't think of it at the moment, but it's a great tool. I hope they come back again this year. It's everything you could possibly think of that you need to track and keep track of is built in there. Composer Catalog is excellent. I know a lot of taxi members use it because with a spreadsheet, you get to a point where it's no longer doable on a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet is so wide and so long that to find stuff, I hate that on Excel spreadsheets when you've got to go down to like the 144th row and the 15th column, and now you're out here in left field somewhere, but you can't remember what the headers are at the top of the columns and the rows.
Well, you got to
track stage.
You got to lock those columns, and you could certainly do it, organize it by date. This is written in the 80s, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85. And then, I signed this song to this person. Okay, great. So the song title's there. The publisher that was signed to is there. Okay, when did I sign it? I signed it on this date. Okay, was it an exclusive in perpetuity or was it a term agreement? Oh, it was a term agreement. How long was the term? 5 years. You put in the 5 years. Well, it started from this date. So 5 years from now, I need a tickler that tells me I
Right.
need to, you know what I mean? It's all of that. And that way, you won't send the same song to a second publisher, even by mistake, because you take a second to look at your Excel spreadsheet and you go, oh, shit, I already signed that out there.
Yeah, track stage is the one I couldn't remember. I absolutely adore the people that came up with the idea and built it. Um, Great software. Everybody between those two, one or the other will work for you. They're both incredibly good between TrackStage and Composer Catalog.
Yeah.
We've got 9 minutes left. I've had a few questions come in. If you guys would repeat them by putting the word question in all caps so I can see it as they scroll by kind of quickly. Here's one where I can actually see the questions right at the bottom. How can you tell if something is created with AI? I know that my screeners here are starting to hear a lot of stuff come in that's been created with AI, even though all the listings say the libraries won't accept it. How do you tell? What are some of the tells, if you will?
Well, that question, if it's just instrumental music, it can be a little more difficult. With my catalog, I'm not signing things that don't, how do I say this? That don't sound like they were made in the box per se.
Mm-hmm.
I've asked people or said, hey, that clavinet is just no, that's just a really bad sample. And I guess if you had AI, if I'm going to be honest, if you had AI and you had a killer sample library, and I mean a killer sample library, you might, depending on how good you are, you might pull the wool over our eyes. But there are certain things that you just go. It's just like ChatGPT. They when you have it write a paper for you, it has these tells, and I'm learning them slowly. And it's same with listening with audio. You have to go that extra step. You have to really dial and go.
The vocals are usually the first thing that stick out to me. And I wonder, I have mixed feelings about AI. Clearly, there's going to be a day where it's going to be allowed in some fashion or form in our industry, maybe not as the writer. But, people say, well, yeah, I have no problem using AI to master my music. And I don't see how that could upset a network, a library, or anybody. It just, it's a computer mastering music. It would upset mastering engineers, which a lot of musicians are worried that AI is going to take their job away, but they're okay with taking, sadly, and I believe hypocritically, they're okay with AI taking away the mastering engineer's job, or maybe the mixer's job, or maybe even somebody who's stemming out the project, because AI is starting to do that pretty well as well. But going back to your Chinese vocal example, if I had a great song, if I had some really good Chinese instrumental stuff, and I saw a brief or a taxi listing for I need a song with a Chinese vocal on it, female Chinese vocal, and I had lyrics already written, and I put them into AI, and it spits out a Chinese sounding vocal. Most of the time, that's going to get used in the context of a travelogue thing. Somebody's walking on the Great Wall of China or trying some cuisine in a market at night out on the street. It's going to be background music. It's not going to be featured for sure. The vocal, it's not a featured vocal, so it's kind of okay. But the problem is how many other pieces of music were scraped for that Chinese vocal to be manufactured. So that's a form of infringement. Nobody gave up. Maybe these people didn't give permission that their Chinese vocal could be sampled, scraped, whatever, as data to create a new Chinese vocal that could be an amalgamation of 72 other Chinese vocals. There's so much stuff that you don't understand, but at least it's not on the other side, starting from the point of, oh, I'm now competing as a writer or composer with a robot.
Yeah, I wrote something on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago. Somebody was talking about AI, and it's all the lawsuits around the major labels having music by the Madonnas and the Springsteens and yada 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 being what the AI is learning from. Like, these were great tracks, these were hits, what made these so great, and there were all these, and there's lawsuits like crazy going on currently, and it kind of dawned on me that, and I'm not pro AI per se, I don't really quite know where I stand, to be honest with you, other than legally I can't step into it.
Right.
It kind of reminded me, I was like, well, wait a second, what about all of the books that we had to read when we were in school? Okay, all those books were published, all those books were copywritten, and we learned from that data, right? I mean, I remember the World Book Encyclopedia. Remember the World Book Encyclopedia?
Absolutely. Had it in my bedroom as a kid.
And so if we put ourselves in a place of, okay, so what I'm trying to do is equate it where we were the equivalent of AI wanting to learn. We needed data.
And then synthesize it into our own thing.
Correct.
Same thing is true with music. The Beatles would be the first to tell you that. Right. As would everybody. And it is understandable and acceptable as long as you're not infringing. Where that line is the difficult thing to understand. But yeah, influences. I mean, come on. We all have our influences. All of us. Even back when I was still engineering and producing, I would sit down and listen to, like records by people that I idolized as engineers and producers and write down notes. Oh, if I ever have to do a guitar solo that's like a Steely Dan solo, I'm reading an article right now and recording engineer producer that says which mic, which amp, which guitar, which pickup. And I'm keeping notes on that stuff because I may need that sound someday. I'm not going to go steal the part, and I won't exactly replicate the sound, but I want a sustained, honey-dripping, distorted sound on a guitar. I've got a resource to go back and find that. So, yeah, we could debate this all day long. Let's take another question. I saw one. Oh, if you sign a song with a catalog, can you still perform it? I assume you can't post it on your YouTube page or other streaming sites.
That depends on the agreement you have with the publisher.
If you had to venture a guess, do most agreements have a no perform clause in there, or
not that I know of?
Okay.
Not that I know of. I personally would have zero problem with anybody performing any song that I have in my catalog. In fact, we've had people hear some of our music in a TV show, and we'll get a request to be able to record it. It'll be an indie artist, and then, oh, I love this song. I heard it on, my heart, great, and yeah, sure, you come to me and we'll get it done. Yeah, it's.
I've got to do something I've never done in 15 years of doing taxi TV. There's a gentleman in the chat room whose name I won't bring up because I don't want to embarrass him at all. But I got an email from him Thursday or Friday last week, I believe, saying, unfortunately, I won't be coming to the Road Rally this year because he's afraid of immigration stuff in the U.S., being stopped at the airport, not being able to get in or get out. But he's not coming illegally. He's just coming as a tourist for a convention. I cannot imagine they're out looking, and let's not get into a whole political debate, but they're not going to LAX looking for people coming from Canada or the UK or wherever going, oh, I'm sorry, you can't come in for this 4-day conference, or capturing you and handcuffing you and throwing you in alligator Alcatraz. Am I nuts, or does he have nothing to worry about?
Well, to me, I mean, if you're coming from another country, I just got back from Paris. I had a passport. I got in. I got out.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you get, if you have a passport, I don't see why, no matter what country you're from, you're going to get in. You're going to get out. And,
Right.
Unless you're on some terrorist list, or you've committed
I'm smuggling
murder.
really bad music to the road rally.
Oh my God, there's nothing worse. Personally, those are the people that should be just hung.
That's
right
right.
out in the middle.
That's
At the next taxi rally, we should get all the bad musicians and just hang them.
Oh, yeah. That would go over really well. All right, here's one more question. How much change do you have to make before a retitle is a valid new song? Well, that's an interesting question.
How much do you need? Say that one more time. How much
would you have to change something, both, I guess, lyrically and melodically, before it's changed enough that it's a new song? Mary Had a Little Lamb, and now I'm going to change the lyric to something completely unrelated and change the melody up somewhat. Is that a new song, even though there are elements of the original still in there?
I would deem it a derivative work, that it is derivative of this. Now, I have quite a bit of derivative works in my catalog. There was, when I first started, it was the 90s, and, Smash Mouth and Sugar Ray and all those cats were big and popular, and, yada, yada, yada. Well, anyway, long story short, later on, the EDM thing started really exploding, and people were doing remixes of anything under the sun. So I ended up, hiring a great producer, and he took some of the stuff that was written in the 90s that I wrote with a friend of mine, and I said, hey, I need this kind of a vibe. Can you do a remix? And he did. And in that, he was now a co-writer of that remix, not of the original,
Right.
but of the remix.
Wow.
Okay. So, and it's a derivative of that piece of music. Now, the melody was the same, the lyric was the same, so all that was the same. So, but it was still a derivative. I'd almost have to hear what this person is asking. I'd have to get inside their head a little bit, because just changing a word here or there is not gonna do it.
No.
I would say put your creative hat on and write a new song.
All right, this one is like a one-word answer, because we're already 4 minutes over here, and I got to wrap this up. But Jim Stamper wants to know, what genre is the most successful in your catalog?
Well, I almost would have to say hip hop.
I think that's the answer. Every single one of my friends who owns a library would say. For some reason, hip hop has had a really long and successful run. You know what? Hip hop has adapted to the landscape, where it used to be a little dark, a little angry, a little straight. Now we get requests for emotionally upbeat hip hop, positive hip hop.
Yes,
And so the beats haven't gone away, but the nature of what the song is about, maybe, or how it's melodically put together, have changed. But I would say 90% of the libraries I work with would say hip hop is probably still the most predominantly asked for.
And I don't like to say it like that, because at one time it could have been, somebody would have asked that question, I would have said, rock. Well, do you mean rock and roll, or do you mean rock? And it's, what's the difference? It's hard rock, metal rock. And, hip hop is a quick word answer, but R&B. I mean, Justin Timberlake isn't a hip hop artist, but he's got those elements. I mean, it's pop.
I call it pop hop.
Sure.
Sometimes I don't have enough room in a subject line when we send out listings, and I'll put pop hop, and I think everybody knows what that is, because if you put, hip hop / pop, it takes more letters. It costs 3 extra letters.
Right.
All right. I can't thank you enough for taking the time. I know how busy you are, and that's why we end up talking on Sunday nights all the time, because that's the only time maybe you and I aren't that busy. Appreciate it, and thank you for your loyalty to Taxi all these years, and for signing so many of our members, and getting them a ton of real, not just getting placements, but good placements. You're not a bargain basement operation, which I really appreciate. So thank you, and thank you for explaining the pain points. And next week, you guys, I spent pretty much all day yesterday, Sunday, working on panel ideas for this year's road rally, and I feel like I could have them nailed down, which would be about 90 days out, which is earlier than I've ever been able to announce this year's road rally panels. So next Monday, I would really appreciate it if you guys would show up and listen to some of these panel ideas and do a little informal banter and polling with me, so I can make final decisions on which ones to go with. All right? So thank you very much, Bob. Appreciate it. Thank you, audience members, and I will see everybody next week for another exciting episode of Taxi TV Live. Bye-bye.